In the small town of Redwood, Friday the 13th had always been a day shrouded in mystery and superstition. The townspeople believed that on this day, evil forces were unleashed, and the town remained on high alert. It was on one of these Friday the 13th that something truly terrifying happened. It all began when a group of friends, Marcos, Anna, Lucas, and Beatriz, decided to spend the night in the old abandoned house at the end of Maple Street. That house had a dark reputation, full of stories of disappearances and apparitions. But, as adventurous youths, they didn't believe in urban legends and decided to challenge their fear. Upon entering the house, they were immediately enveloped by a heavy atmosphere. The air was dense, and a feeling of being watched accompanied them at every step. Nevertheless, nervously laughing, they explored the rooms, trying not to be unsettled by the shadows that seemed to move on the walls. "Let's go to the basement. I heard it's the scariest place," suggested Marcos, trying to maintain a brave spirit. Descending the creaky stairs, they reached the dark basement. The only light came from the flashlights they had brought, revealing old wooden boxes, furniture covered with dusty sheets, and a strange inscription on the wall. "Those who disturb the eternal sleep will find darkness." Beatrice laughed, trying to break the tension. Someone was very inspired when they wrote this, but the fun quickly turned to terror when Anna found an old, dusty diary. Upon opening the diary, the yellowed pages told the story of Elizabeth, a young girl who lived in the house with her family. In the last entry, dated on a Friday the 13th many years ago, Elizabeth described how her family was attacked by something unspeakable that emerged from the depths of the house. As Anna read aloud, a cold wind swept through the basement, extinguishing the flashlights. Panic set in. "We need to get out of here now," shouted Lucas, trying to find the stairs in the dark. But the basement door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Marcos tried to force the door open, but it seemed sealed by an invisible force. "We're trapped," he exclaimed, fear evident in his voice. Suddenly, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. It had bright red eyes and an oppressive presence that made them feel as if they were being crushed. "You have awakened the curse," the figure whispered, its voice echoing through the basement. Desperate, the friends tried to fight the creature, but their efforts were futile. The figure moved with supernatural speed, attacking them with overwhelming force. One by one, they were subdued by the dark entity. Darkness engulfed everything, and the last thing Marcos saw before losing consciousness was the figure dragging his friends to a dark corner of the basement. When he finally regained consciousness, the silence was deafening. The creature and his friends had disappeared. With great effort, he managed to unlock the basement door and stumbled out into the street. But something was different. Redwood seemed deserted, as if everyone had vanished. Marcos knew that the curse of Friday the 13th was real and that he had been spared for a reason. Perhaps to serve as a warning, or maybe because the entity had other plans for him. With a heavy heart and a mind full of questions, he turned to the cursed house one last time, and, in an almost inaudible whisper, he vowed that he would return to rescue his friends and end the curse once and for all. But he knew, deep in his soul, that the true fight was just beginning. Marcos couldn't sleep that night. The image of the creature's red eyes, his friends being dragged into the darkness, and the feeling of helplessness haunted him. Determined to find out what really happened, he decided to investigate. Maybe there was a way to save his friends and end the curse. The next morning, Marcos went to the town library in search of any information about the house on Maple Street. The librarian, an elderly woman named Donna Helena, looked at him with a mix of pity and concern when he asked about the house. "You shouldn't have gone there, boy," she said, lowering her voice. "That house has been cursed for over a century. Many have entered, few have left." Marcos insisted, and Donna Helena reluctantly brought out an old, dusty book. This diary belonged to one of the first inhabitants of the house. "You might find something useful here." Marcos spent the day reading the diary, which belonged to Elizabeth's great-grandfather, John Whitaker. He discovered that John was an occultist who performed dark rituals in the house, trying to summon entities from another plane. One of these rituals went wrong, resulting in the curse that plagued the house and its inhabitants ever since. At the end of the diary, John described a banishment ritual that could undo the curse, but warned it would be extremely dangerous and require great courage. Marcos knew it was his only hope. With a heavy heart, he decided he would return to the house that same night. As night fell, armed with the diary and a few items he thought might be useful, Marcos returned to the house on Maple Street. The feeling of being watched returned immediately upon crossing the door. The air felt heavier, almost as if the house itself was alive and aware of his presence. In the basement, Marcos prepared the ritual as described in John's diary. He drew symbols on the floor, lit candles, and recited the ancient words with a trembling voice. As he recited, the temperature in the basement dropped drastically, and he felt the presence of the entity approaching. The red eyes appeared again in the darkness, but this time Marcos was prepared. He held up an ancient stone, a talisman mentioned in the diary, and continued reciting the ritual. The creature roared in agony, its form flickering and distorting. For a moment, it seemed the ritual was working. But then, something went wrong. The entity attacked, knocking Marcos down and destroying the protective circle he had drawn. The basement began to shake, and a sense of despair took hold of him. But before the creature could make its final move, a bright light filled the basement. A spectral figure appeared. It was Elizabeth. Her spirit, trapped by the curse, was now fighting alongside Marcos. Together, they recited the final words of the ritual. With a deafening scream, the entity was sucked into the ground, disappearing in an explosion of shadows. The basement stopped shaking, and Elizabeth's light began to fade. "Thank you," she whispered before disappearing completely. Marcos fell to his knees, exhausted but relieved. He had managed to break the curse, but his friends were still missing, and he knew his fight was far from over. As he left the house, he was greeted by a group of concerned townspeople. Among them was Dona Helena. "You did it, boy, but this victory comes at a price. The house still holds secrets, and you need to uncover the full truth." Marcos looked at the cursed house one last time. He knew he would need help for what was to come. The curse might have been broken, but something was still wrong, and he was determined to find his friends and solve the mystery once and for all. But he knew, deep in his soul, that the real battle was just beginning. And so, Marcos prepared for a new journey, a new chapter in his fight against the evil forces that still haunted Redwood. Who could predict what was to come? In the days that followed, Marcos tried to gather more information about the house and the curse. He knew he couldn't face everything alone, so he sought help from the older residents of the town, those who might know more secrets. Dona Helena revealed that there was a secret society in Redwood, formed decades ago, dedicated to studying and combating the evil that haunted the town. Reluctantly at first, she took him to their meeting place, an old cabin in the forest, where the members met in secret. There, Marcos met people who believed in the stories and were willing to help him. Among them were Thomas, an occultism scholar, and Clara, a medium who had the ability to communicate with spirits. They listened carefully to Marcos' story and agreed to help him find his friends and put an end to the curse once and for all. Together, the group began planning their next visit to the house. During one of her spiritual sessions, Clara managed to contact Elizabeth's spirit again. Elizabeth revealed that the entity was still present, though weakened, and that his friends were trapped in an intermediary plane between the world of the living and the dead. To rescue them, they would need to perform an even more complex and dangerous ritual, one that would involve crossing into this intermediary plane. Marcos knew this meant facing his worst fears and confronting the darkness head-on. But he was determined. On the scheduled night, armed with new knowledge and prepared for the worst, the group returned to the house. As they entered, the atmosphere was even heavier, and the whispers of the shadows seemed louder. Marcos felt his heart racing, but he knew he couldn't back down. They descended to the basement once again and began the new ritual. Clara entered a trance, guiding them along the correct path. Suddenly, the basement transformed, and they found themselves in a foggy, dark environment, where the rules of reality no longer applied. The shadows around them moved restlessly, and a sense of imminent danger hung in the air. The figure with red eyes appeared again, fiercer and more determined. Marcos, Thomas, and Clara knew this would be the final battle. As Marcos moved forward, he felt the presence of his friends growing closer. But with the entity threatening at every step, he knew a sacrifice might be necessary. Determined, he faced the creature, ready to do whatever it took to bring his friends back. And so, with everyone's fate at stake, the real battle began. Thank you for watching another Dark Tales video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any scary stories. See you next time, and beware of the dark.